About a year ago, Rogue9, who's a Rainbow Six Siege YouTuber, was accused of harassment by a Ubisoft employee. He was blacklisted from ever working with Ubisoft again, and the popular Siege podcast that he co-hosted was ultimately cancelled. But now, almost a year later, Rogue9 says that those allegations were all a lie, and that this is just a giant cover-up by another Ubisoft employee. Alright, in case you somehow forgot, we're putting out new YouTube videos all the time. We want to know what you guys want to see, what stories you want covered on Don't At Me. So, like the video, drop us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay, now, back to the story. Okay, we got all sorts of allegations to get through, but this story starts with the Hot Breach podcast, which Rogue9 co-hosted alongside other Siege YouTubers GetFlanked and Prodigio P. And as far as Siege-specific podcasts go, it was pretty popular.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to a very special episode of the Hot Breach podcast.
Back in October of 2019, the Hot Breach guys were invited by Ubisoft down to a balancing workshop that was being hosted in Barcelona. The idea was that they would come, experience what the workshop had to say, and then record a podcast live in Barcelona. The reality is, this Barcelona trip was a disaster for everyone involved, and it actually led to the end of the Hot Breach podcast.
Because the very next day, she told all of her Montreal-based colleagues and many of the Barcelona-based ones that I'd been harassing her and that I made her feel, quote, very uncomfortable. And unsurprisingly, making such a serious accusation against me turned an awkward situation into a complete nightmare.
Now, almost a year after the trip, Rogue9 recently put out a video talking about the harassment allegations made against him and how the Barcelona trip played a role in ultimately getting him blacklisted by Ubisoft.
I will be sharing a story of how I was physically threatened at a Rainbow Six event by a Ubisoft staff member who was drunk off his face, as well as details of defamation and match fixing by another.
In the video, he also accuses two Siege community developers of abusing their position, threatening him, and even allegedly match fixing a charity creator show match. We'll get to those accusations in a little bit, but first, let's start with the harassment allegations in this Barcelona trip. According to Rogue9, in the months leading up to the Barcelona trip, he struck up a conversation with a Ubisoft employee over DMs that, quote, got a bit personal, implying that things were moving towards a romantic relationship.
Last year, between August and October, things became a bit personal between a Ubisoft employee and me. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but it is important to briefly touch on this. Luckily, almost all of our communications were over Twitter DMs, and I still have the entire thread to prove exactly what happened. These messages prove that she made the first advances and that she repeatedly encouraged me to keep in touch with her.
Eventually, Rogue9 says that the woman he was talking to clarified the situation. There wasn't going to be a romantic partnership, and while he felt led on and was hurt and told her as much, apparently according to him, the whole thing was chalked up to a giant misunderstanding. Now, the woman Rogue9 was talking to was the same woman that was going to be running the upcoming Barcelona balancing event, which, remember, the Hot Breach guys were invited to. And while Rogue says that the Barcelona trip was awkward but ultimately harmless, I've had multiple sources tell me a different story.
And sadly, all of this happened right before a week-long balancing workshop at Ubisoft's Barcelona offices, which she had organized and that I had committed to taking part in many months earlier.
From what I was told and how GetFlanked shares his perspective in a recent video he uploaded, Rogue9 took the rejection pretty personally, and it ruined the entire trip for the Hot Breach team.
Once we arrived, it was evident from like day one that it was going to be an issue. Like, I would say that it was awkward from the get-go.
There were awkward dinners with everyone involved. Rogue's co-hosts did their best to distract him. GetFlanked says that Rogue tried to confront her about the situation, which Rogue disputes. The point is, this situation was terrible for everyone involved.
Everything went from like awkward on the trip to just like dysfunction. Like, it was, the tension was unbearable, and it was so awful, okay? It got to the point where like she very clearly, like, you had to like organize the taxis that we took from the studio and back. Like, you had to make sure that they weren't in the same taxi and stuff like that. Like, it was awful. Like, it consumed the entire trip. It went from Rogue being consumed by it to it just putting a dark cloud over everything. Over the course of that entire trip, I never saw her do anything that I felt was unprofessional. I never saw anything from any Ubisoft employee on that trip that I felt was unprofessional.
And then, the day the podcast was set to record, with the employee featured as a prominent guest, Rogue9 allegedly tried to veto her because he was still upset about the entire situation. While they managed to get through the episode, GetFlanked says that Rogue9's behavior on the trip caused him and Prodigio Pete to actually end the Hot Breach podcast after the Barcelona episode and to stop working with Rogue9 altogether.
We basically decided at that point that we don't want to work with Rogue anymore.
And not long after that, Rogue9 received the email from Ubisoft saying that they were banning him from ever working with Ubisoft again because of these alleged harassment allegations. Quote, "Due to your conduct during the operator balancing sprint workshop in Barcelona, Spain, we regret to inform you that Ubisoft will no longer be working with you moving forward. This includes future activations such as the London event taking place on October 24th. We have and always will value the content you have created over the years. That said, we cannot and will not accept behavior directed towards Ubisoft staff that is disrespectful, dismissive, or rude." End quote. Shortly after GetFlanked put out his video sharing his perspective on the Barcelona balancing trip, Rogue9 posted another twit longer, basically disputing a lot of the events that GetFlanked says happened. At this point, it's become a bit of a he said. And the crazy thing about this situation is that Ubisoft reached out to me with a statement long before I ever asked for comment, which to me says that they're taking this very seriously. Quote, "The work of content creators is critical to the health and integrity of our communities, and our relationship with these creators is built on mutual respect and professionalism. If these principles are not respected, Ubisoft will take action we deem appropriate in order to protect our employees, partners, and the wider community." End quote. Okay, so that wraps up the Barcelona and harassment allegations, but we're not done with everything yet. Now, on top of stating that the harassment accusations are a lie, Rogue9 also makes allegations to former Siege community developers Justin Kruger and Craig Robinson, who goes by Epi Online, and that's how I'll be referring to him from now on. Basically, these two guys were largely responsible for working with Siege content creators, whether at events or online. Having a community development team is pretty typical. They act as a buffer between the developer and the rest of the community, while also working with content creators. And as far as Siege goes, Justin and Craig were the go-to guys for this type of stuff. Now, Rogue9 alleges that at an after party for the Siege 2019 Invitational, Justin Kruger acted in a drunken and threatening manner towards him after Rogue9 congratulated Justin on a recent promotion.
I too clapped Justin on the shoulder, congratulated him on his new role, wished him all the best, and told him that the entire Siege community would miss him. In response, I got an angry scowl. He threw his head back, stuck out his chin, and waved his hand in my face in a gesture that was basically telling me to fuck off while saying, "Yeah, right." Then he brought his hands down and briefly kept both of his fists clenched by his side while standing in front of me, still scowling, with his chin up in a clearly threatening manner.
He also accuses Justin and Epi, but primarily Epi, of gatekeeping the Siege content creator community, giving streamer charms to their friends who didn't meet the criteria, and overall just playing favorites. The Godly Noob posted similar accusations of gatekeeping playing favorites on Twitter, which lines up to what multiple sources have told me. One example is Epi allegedly giving a streamer charm to a content creator named Punji Stick, despite the fact that he didn't meet the criteria and only because they were friends. And basically, in order to get a streamer charm, you need to hit certain streaming milestones, like stream 20 hours of Siege per month, have 350 plus concurrent viewers, and so on. And streamer charms are huge for creator growth, because the only way to get a charm in-game is by subscribing to a creator's Twitch channel. Multiple sources have told me that even if you are a well-known content creator, if for some reason Justin or Epi didn't like you, or they had a friend that they could work with instead, you'd be left out in the cold. Now, I know these allegations seem like petty beefs with content creators who feel like they're not getting enough shine, but this is actually a potential problem. Trust plays a huge role between the community development team and the content creators. If the content creators can't trust you or feel like you aren't being honest, why would they want to make content for your game? And if they don't want to create content around your game, well, that's a huge fucking problem, because who watches the stuff they make? The community, the people buying the battle passes and the skins and the streamer charms, basically the entire lifeblood of your product. Now, Rogue's final allegation against Epi is the most egregious, but also the hardest to prove.
I know for a fact that during his time on the Rainbow Six ComDev team, Craig Robinson engaged in match fixing of content creator show matches. He openly sabotaged teams, and there are even allegations that he ordered teams to throw matches.
Rogue9 alleges that somehow Epi fixed a Twitch Rivals creator show match in 2019 in order to get his friends more money. It was supposed to be a $50,000 charity show match, with 40 grand going to the winning team's charity of choice, 10 grand going to the loser's team charity of choice. But on top of that, the creators that participated were paid to be there, and allegedly the winning players from the winning team were paid an extra $2,500 each. Rogue9 alleges that Epi stacked the winning team with his friends, and the losing team had 2 players who had never played Siege before. I've spoken with people who were at the event, and they say that yes, the format was weird, as in, why are content creators being paid to play in a charity show match? And yes, the winning team was stacked, but nobody I spoke to says that Epi deliberately fixed the match. Rogue9 says that he has definitive proof that Epi did fix this content creator match, but at this point, he hasn't made that evidence public. All of this brings us to now, where Rogue9 is still blacklisted from working with Ubisoft almost a year after the Barcelona trip. He says that he can't get a single Ubisoft employee to speak with him, explicitly stating that Epi somehow managed to coerce hundreds of Ubisoft employees into silence, all because Epi is close friends with the woman who made the harassment allegations in the first place.
I reached out to various contacts on several occasions with the simple goal of clearing my name. That's all I wanted.
The entire Barcelona situation honestly seems like a giant miscommunication that was handled poorly by everyone involved, including Rogue9. Sure, being blacklisted over something like this does seem a tad harsh, but ultimately, that's Ubisoft's call to make. And while obviously the most popular content creators are always going to get the most attention from the PR teams, this pattern of favoritism and gatekeeping within the Siege community is concerning, and I do hope that Ubisoft is taking those allegations seriously. For all you youngsters, yes, this is nothing but teen angst drama bullshit, but holy fuck, is it some of the best teen angst drama bullshit that you'll find ever on TV, okay? And am I being hyperbolic here? Of course I am.